everybody, and welcome to another early childhood discussion. Today, we're going to be having a conscious conversation with Gary Romano, and he's the CEO of Civitas Strategies, a management consultancy focused on nonprofits helping marginalized children and families. Gary's currently working on a project funded by the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation to help childcare providers in Passaic County navigate the pandemic. We're so glad that we have Gary here with us today, and another opportunity for the Technical Assistance Center of Grow New Jersey Kids, North Region, to bring you some really timely information. Specifically, the project his team is working on is providing free technical assistance to help childcare providers increase revenue and decrease costs over the next few months during these very uncertain times. For those of you who are advising childcare centers, he's sharing his team's materials and methods to extend their impact. So Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. And
My pleasure.
To really welcome you to our show. And can you tell me what are some of the challenges that you're seeing in the field right now?
So, we're seeing rather obviously a number of providers who are stretched thin, right? Razor thin profit margins to begin with, right? Nobody was getting rich in childcare. But with the pandemic, it's gotten even worse. And what we're seeing is two things concurrently. One is costs are going up, right? So the ratios are lower than they were. PPE costs are up. You also have other cleaning costs that are going up. At the same time, we're seeing revenue down. We're seeing that families are not coming back quickly, and understandably so. Right? I don't want to make it sound like it's a jab at families, but we're seeing a lot of providers at 25% to 50% of capacity, and really, working extraordinarily hard for any parent, any new parent to enroll. So, there's this change, right, in terms of revenues going down, costs increasing. At the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know where we're heading as we enter into winter. We don't know if there'll be closures. We don't know who's going to get ill or isn't. And accordingly, a lot of providers we're seeing have uncertainty in their own finances. They're not quite sure where they're headed. And so, the analogy I use is, that's like a plane that's going down, but you don't know your altitude or your velocity. So it's hard to make decisions for providers to make decisions because they don't quite know where they are financially because they're so focused on the day-to-day, and understandably so. At the same time, there's not major grants right now, so there's a lot of smaller plays that providers can make, but not a big play like the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, where we could say, oh, this will cover 10 weeks of your costs, right? But rather, we're thinking about a lot of smaller things that move the ball incrementally.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you said, it just resonates with me so much. Childcare has always been a business of heart. And as you described, people are not getting rich if they're doing childcare right. To provide high quality care, it's expensive, and it has gotten more expensive with the increased costs of needing cleaning supplies and PPEs and all that stuff that goes along with it. And then combined with a decrease in enrollment, which has become a huge challenge for programs in maintaining their staffing and figuring out their budgets. So can you talk with me about how you're currently approaching your work with providers?
Absolutely. So we're focusing rather pragmatically on how do you increase revenue where you can? How do you decrease costs, right? So the two basic elements of what makes you profitable, what keeps you alive, what keeps your cash flow going. And within that, we've been using two tools, and these are publicly available tools, and we'll talk later how to share them, but if people want to see them, we're happy to share them. One is a rubric, and that rubric, which is a fancy way of saying essentially a checklist, is one that we developed with people like yourself and your colleague Melissa with 4 C's, the CCR&R in Passaic, with Child Care Connection in Mercer County, with programs for parents in Essex County. And what it has is we took every play that anyone can come up with, and of course our team contributed also from what we're seeing nationally, every play that we can, and we put it on that rubric. Mm-hmm. And again, we're thinking increase revenue, decrease costs, and I should caveat in the short term, right? We're thinking about a 6-month horizon at most. And so, this is a very simple tool. You just basically go down it and say, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And somebody can do it themselves as well. It doesn't have to be a TA provider or anything. And when you start to check those off, when you get down to, the end, right? Now you have a plan because you have a number of things that you can say, these are things I have not done yet, right? And again, that's something we're offering freely to providers or coaches if you want to self-extract. And by the way, it also has things like if a website is referenced, we have the website link. So you have to dig around for it. The other thing that we've been using is what we call a cash flow forecasting workbook. So as I mentioned, the plane's going down. We're not sure where people are headed. A lot of people are falling back on budgets if they have them. And unfortunately, those budgets were made at the end of 2019. And as we're talking about costs going up, revenues going down, the budget is really immaterial to where you are. And so cash flow becomes a lot more pertinent, right? Because cash flow is about how much money do you have coming in, how much money do you have going out? And if they don't sync up, you're in trouble. So it's a really important way to start to think about where are you month by month, mm-hmm. and where might you need to make some decisions that are going to be tough decisions, and where you might need help. And what we're finding is in the field as we work with providers, two things happen. One is that there's a sense of relief. It's a little bit painful at first to kind of look at those numbers, but then there's a sense of relief because now they know what's coming. But then two, they can now start making informed decisions and say, gosh, now's the time when I'm going to have to act on this or that, because that's where the cash flow becomes problematic.
Right. So it sounds like you've created something, and I keep hearing this expression being used again and again. It allows people to look under the hood. Mm-hmm. So it allows you to look at what's happening today. So even programs that did have a budget, that budget is completely out the window. It's not applicable anymore because, as you said, it was created in 2019. And who on earth, be closed for a few months or many months or have a decrease in enrollment due to a pandemic? Like, no one expected this. No one ever anticipated this was on our horizon. So I like that idea that you've described, that people can do this on their own. That it allows you to take a look at where you are right now. And then it sounds like it gives you some ideas for some really concrete, actionable steps that how you might consider moving forward. And I think that's important because, as you described, even though it might be painful to look at where you are because it's so far from where you had hoped to be, where you plan to be, it is the reality. And so addressing that reality is important because it allows you to move forward with a plan. If you're just thinking about, we'll figure it out when we get there, then you're operating, trying to make decisions from an emergency situation where you could never make your best decisions. But this allows you to be, putting some real conscious thought behind what might I do? I know we're not in a good spot right now, but what might I do to make it better for me personally? And it sounds what you've described that the tool is very individualized in terms of everyone is going to be looking at their very specific situation. And the things that they might choose to operationalize and put into practice could be very different than the program in the next town, but it's what makes sense for them.
That's absolutely right. And, building on it, a couple of points to bring them home, as you mentioned, It is something a provider can do on their own. It's, if you're a provider and you have QuickBooks or whatever, it's a good guide. We're finding a lot of providers, even those with controllers and CFOs, are finding it helpful to have a process. But more importantly, for most of the providers out there who don't have that infrastructure, it is very simple, step-by-step, pen and paper, no prior knowledge of accounting needed, right? In terms of working it. And as you're mentioning, there's a lot of ahas, right? So 2 examples that we saw in Passaic County, we had one provider who cut their deficit by a third because they were running a deficit. And what they did was when they did the cash flow forecast, they realized, here's some costs that I really don't need. And I didn't even realize they were accumulating. And what we find is, by the way, overall, whether you're a single individual or whether you're a very large center, PPE costs fall into that category. We find a lot of providers don't realize how much those costs are creeping up and how much they're eating away at their revenue. Mm-hmm. And so this becomes a way to start capturing it. As one family care provider said, she said, I didn't realize how big it was because I was buying some of my PPE stuff here, some there. I'd go to the dollar store, I'd throw some stuff in. But when I was forced to add it all up and see what the cost was, I realized, oh my gosh, that's not sustainable. And I thought I was doing fine, but now I have to start making some different choices. I have to activate, right? So there are some ways that it starts to move you forward that, even though a bit painful, are going to be important for your future and the future of your business.
Right. I have heard because of the difficulty that programs are having securing cleaning supplies and PPEs, people are picking them up, wherever they can. So typically, they may have had a vendor that they dealt with. If they're a larger program, they may have had, supplies coming in regularly of the things they need, and it was easier to track that way. But as you described, people are needing to buy things here, there, and everywhere to make sure they have what they need to keep kids safe and keep, people healthy. But it's eye-opening to find out how much you're spending on those very, very necessary materials that have gone up in price astronomically as a result of the demand.
They really have. And at the same time, again, your enrollment isn't the same. And I would also add that, the other thing that people are beginning to use the cash flow forecast to think about is what happens January 1 if you're a subsidy care provider, which is you go back to the, we got a delay, yay! But, you go back to the attendance-based system, and it's the one using the phone, right? So one of the things that a lot, the number of the providers are saying is they realize, my gosh, my revenue is going to really change January 1. So how do I start preparing for that now? Because it is going to be so critical. Because, and those of you who are not subsidy care providers, what I'm referencing is that subsidy care providers have been paid at pre-COVID levels for enrollment, right? Which is essentially, getting them through, which is a good thing. The pandemic, when these enrollments are so low, but on January 1, it goes back to attendance. So if they're at 25, 50% of enrollment, that's what they're going to get paid, not 100%. And so that's going to be a big shock to the system. And so this is giving a way to start thinking about, well, what do I do come January 1, rather than you hit a wall.
Exactly. So having that plan in place right now is really crucial. Because as we know, the unemployment rate is not where we'd like it to be. And some of those children who are being paid through enrollment versus attendance may not return on January 1. Their parents may be unemployed. They may not be in need of childcare. And so, as you said, the question then becomes, how do I make this new financial forecast work? So even having a few weeks lead time, as you said, before you hit that wall, to know and plan and strategize how you're gonna make that happen. Mm-hmm. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Gary, on assessing and strategizing? I think that your company has just been doing amazing work in bringing assistance and support in a very practical, actionable way for the business aspects of handling life during a pandemic as a child care program operator.
Yeah, I mean, just a few final thoughts. One is, as you mentioned at the top of the show, we are providing free business consulting just for pandemic, to get you through the pandemic. So if you want, you could reach out to us for that. If you are a provider and you want these tools to see them for yourself and try to use them yourself, that's perfectly fine too. We're willing to share those. And if you're a coach in any form in the state and you want these tools, don't hesitate. The rubric is very simple to use. You could run through it in under an hour. And again, very helpful to providers. The cash flow workbook is very simple to use. We have that both in English and Spanish. So, to help with any language barriers. And, certainly if you want to reach us on those, if you email us at info at civstrat, civstrat.com. We'd be happy to share those materials with you, or if you want to enroll for the pandemic business consulting, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Thank you, Gary. This has been so helpful. And as you described, the rubric and the workbook, it sounds so much like the Grow New Jersey Kids plan that so many programs have taken part of and continue to be part of in New Jersey, the self-assessment being your rubric, and then your quality improvement plan, your workbook of how am I going to make my plan happen. So this tells me where I am, and then this is my action steps on how I'm gonna move forward. And I love the idea that it's just one baby step at a time of figuring out how to continue to thrive in uncertain times and how to continue to make your early childhood business work. Because as we said, nobody got in this business to become rich. And we are all wanting every program to be able to continue providing quality care for children. We've heard it said, we always knew that childcare was an essential business, but I think the world realized it during the pandemic. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you being here today and look forward to speaking with you again. So
Same here.
take care. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.